with from the desk of the editor, but especially now from the Voice and Viewpoint. As I've shared with Dr. Thompson, we have people from over 10 countries going to our publication online. If you don't know this, you are able to download the Voice and Viewpoint app in the Google and Apple store at no cost. And we are streaming on a regular basis news items concerning African American, Black people of color as a result of a partnership with Associated Press. And so you don't have to go to other people to find out what's happening. You can come to us and we can share with you. Now, this evening, if you wish to call in, our phone number is 858-251-6111. 858-251-6111. And in addition to being able to do that, you can go to godradio1.com, and we're streaming Dr. Thompson on Facebook and
Facebook, YouTube, and both GOD as well as the
Voice and Viewpoint
Yes,
sites.
sir.
Okay. So, Dr. Thompson, take it away with that before we bring on our guests.
Well, as you know, we're going to come back and talk about the many things that are happening throughout the country. But more than anything, we want to make sure that we continue to keep our people updated on what is happening locally and nationally and internationally, because, again, there's a lot of things that are impacting, and we have to have these real discussions, and that's what's going to be very important at this point, is having those real type of discussions about how people are feeling. I know that with Black Men and Women United, they started a conversation about the impact of the multiple shootings that we've had, and over 200 shootings, mass shootings this year alone. And so as we go throughout the show, I want to circle back around to that. But man, am I excited about our guest this evening.
Yes. Well, we have a very special guest this evening, Ms. Julie Coker, who is the president of the Tourism Authority here in San Diego. And this is so special to have this dynamic Black woman assume this position because, you know, we used to have the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and as you know, Voice and Viewpoint through Gold Coast and all the things we sponsored fought many years to get inclusion so that we could be an active participant with the city. And this is so important because, as Ms. Coker will be able to discuss with us, you know, African Americans or Black American travelers spent over $63 billion on tourism in 2018. And I guess globally, we have spent over $109 billion in terms of it. And these expenditures were part of the things that allowed us to bring Gold Coast Classic here because we were able to show that there were people other than Europeans that wanted to come in the winter who could come and enjoy San Diego. So, Ms. Coker, I want to just give you a few moments. You come from the city of love there, Philadelphia, with one of my favorite colleagues, Mr. Bob Bogle, former president of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, gentleman and a scholar in many respects. And we would just like to give you a chance to just say a few words about yourself and what you're doing. And we like to have kind of an easygoing conversation here. So you won't get any harassment from any folks. Anybody that's impolite, we cut them off. And we just move on. So we're real strict about that kind of stuff, right, Dr. Thompson?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So please tell us a bit, our audience a bit about yourself and this job that people don't know that you're down there doing every day.
Absolutely. First and foremost, I just want to thank you for having me on, but more importantly, thank you for the work that you've done here in San Diego. Because I know firsthand that it is not easy. And certainly when we're doing the work, it was unprecedented. And there were many barriers that you faced and continue to face. And to stay the course means a lot. It means a lot for generations that are coming behind you to know that things are possible. So thank you for the good fight, but more importantly, thank you for the good trouble that I'm sure that you got into many of times and continue to push the needle. So I'm really fortunate to have come at a time, and some would say, you know, why would you say it's fortunate? I literally came to San Diego in the middle of COVID. So I moved here June of 2020. And not only did I move here June of 2020, but I moved here 4 days after George Floyd was murdered.
Wow.
So one of my last memories of flying out of San Diego was the weekend before. I flew out on a Monday, and that Saturday and Sunday were protests all over the city, really all over the state, all over the country. But certainly, as you know, in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, and we like to add, and sisterly affectionate,
Mm-hmm.
and they seem to go with it as well, effectiveness. But really, they are, it's the birthplace of the nation. So, protests there to me just have a different meaning and a different context. And so my memory of that last weekend leaving Philadelphia was just complete unrest and frustration, as we all felt across the country. But I think that particular murder, because we know how many African Americans have been murdered over the years, was in real time because we were all home. So we had no choice but to watch it. And it really just consumed all of us as it should have done years ago. But it definitely stopped us dead in our tracks. And so I'm flying out of Philadelphia and I'm thinking, I'm in the middle of COVID. I'm in the tourism industry, which came to a screeching halt. And on top of it, we just had another Black person that was murdered uh, senselessly. And here I am going to a city, and certainly no disrespect, to a city that only has 4 or 5% African American. And I'm leaving a city that is 57% minority. So I can be honest 2 years later and say there were a lot of mixed emotions. I felt like I was walking out of the battle, if you will, and into what people thought would be a very easy position because it's here in San Diego and it's beautiful weather and so forth. But I came primarily because it was only 5% African American. And I thought if we don't move the needle on that, and if we don't come to grow the audience of African American travelers and African American visitors in particular here to San Diego, and we don't grow the African Americans in leadership ranks, then what good is your career, right? So it would have been very easy for me to stay in a city that is very familiar and that I'm very comfortable with. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, so Philadelphia was our big city, but I felt that there was a need and a pull for me to come to San Diego because I saw what I'm hopeful is the potential. So over the last 2 years, have really focused on one, just bringing visitors back. So a week after I landed, hotels opened for leisure visitation. Obviously, we have great weather here. We have a beautiful coastline. We have a lot of outdoor attractions. So we were able to really push the needle and bring leisure customers back to the destination faster, really than any other city in California, but really faster than across the nation because of the natural assets that we have, but also because we were able to market and communicate to visitors across the country why they should come to San Diego. And so whether you drove or if you were willing to fly, you could get here and you could pretty much eat outdoors. You could take your family outdoors. You could do hikes. You could sit at the beach if you'd like. You could, participate in any of the number of cultural attractions here. So the last 2 years has really been focused on getting folks back to work. The other key point I would say to your listeners is prior to COVID, we had over 200,000 folks employed by the travel and tourism industry. And we know that a majority of those that were in, I'll say, lesser paying jobs, so housekeeping, dishwashing, setup, and so forth, were our people, right? And they were Black and brown people. And they were out of work because there were no visitors in the hotels. So there's no rooms to clean, so you don't have workers. There's no dishes to wash, and so you don't have workers. And so that has always been my motivation, is to make sure that our people are working. Because I know when we work, we build community. We're able to buy houses. We're able to put our kids through college. We're able to hopefully level the playing field in different perspectives. We're able to put a savings account, money in the bank. There are many of our folks that are single parents, and so they need those 40 hours a week. So we were really driven by getting San Diegans back to work, which will always be my priority. But certainly people who look like me are even more of my priority. And so we've been able to do that. And certainly we still have a long way to go. But I'm pleased at where we are. And now we're probably up to about 188,000 folks that are back at work. So at the high water mark, 70,000 San Diegans were out of work, and we lost probably 20 years of economic gain. When we compare COVID to 9/11, which was the last, I would say, major catastrophe to our industry, this COVID was easily 10 times greater than what we saw in 9/11, and obviously has lasted much longer than I think any of us have anticipated. But I'm happy to be here. I am happy to represent women in leadership. I am happy to represent African Americans in leadership. And my goal, quite honestly, is to leave the seat better than I found it.
Well, you know, as you were speaking, so many things rushed through my mind. We remember before they put the Midway here, it was just a model in the Santa Fe train station. And I was doing NPR during the time that the decision was made. And I would just wonder, how on earth are they going to put that ship out there? And even going back before then, when we first did Gold Coast Classic, one of the big things we had was a president's reception on the USS Kitty Hawk. And it turns out that the commander of the Kitty Hawk was, and that whole staff was from HBCUs. And so by having this event there, we were able to bring the presidents and the faculty, and we were able to bring young people on board who could interact with staff. And we had about 400 people on that ship that night for that event. At the same time, across the bay in the convention center, we had 12,000 people for the first step show. And so those things represented some real major events. Now, when we fast forward, Comic-Con has been one of the biggest money makers for San Diego, and we know it's really been crippling the past couple of years. But in a sense, Comic-Con has come out better in some ways because people didn't have to wait in long lines, and they could tune in to whichever sections they wanted. They did a little mini Comic-Con scenario here to bring some more people back. And so some of these things are happening. But just speak to this factor. A lot of the businesses in the travel industry are complaining that they can't get people to come back to work now. And so what does that look like here in terms of jobs? Are people beginning to come back, or are they still not coming back, or what's happening?
Certainly, great question. And the first, I want to say, the work that you did is so important, because what it did, it exposed a market to San Diego that we would not have seen otherwise. And so when folks come to, whether it be the classic or convention or meeting or conference, and they have the opportunity, especially folks that look like us, they have the opportunity to experience a destination that they might not have done otherwise, then they tend to come back either for other meetings, conventions, but more importantly, they come back on their own dime for leisure. And so I'm sure many of those that came for the classic, there's that halo effect. So they came for other things. They had a great time with their spouse or with their family and friends, maybe it's with their line sisters or what have you. And then they scheduled another trip to come back. So events like that really do matter. You are 100% correct. Workforce development is probably our number one priority right now. And of course, it's a challenge across the nation. And what is so, I would say, mind-boggling to most of us in the industry, but also just in the country, is where have those workers gone? Because there isn't an industry that will tell you that they're fully staffed. So whether you're talking about life sciences, whether you're talking about technology or innovation, whether you're talking about education, whether you're talking about government work, the city is having the same challenge. City and county is having the same challenge with finding workers. And we all know in the past, those jobs have been good, solid pensions and a career path. And they're even having challenges in, of course, travel and tourism. So it is definitely a challenge. And certainly this is no secret to you, as long as you've been here in San Diego. What is exasperating our situation here is cost of living, right? So even as you are able to attract and recruit talent from other destinations, whether it be from, Arizona, Nevada, or even from the East Coast or the Midwest, our cost of living here in San Diego and lack of affordable housing definitely is something that is going to stick out in our destination more than others.
Well, if
And
I may, Dr. Thompson, this point, you would think that we would learn because history repeats itself. This is the same problem that they had in Colorado with the ski industry, because they
Mhm.
needed workers, but there were no places for the workers to stay. And I remember a situation here where there was a Latino sister who was one of the housekeepers at the Hotel Del Coronado. She lived in National City. She wanted to be on the island, but there's no housing that she could afford on the Hotel Del. Now, we rave about the minimum wage going up to $15 an hour, but really in San Diego, it's suggested that you need no less than $25 an hour if you're going to even begin to start living here. And I know as an employer, I've had to just raise wages and offer all kinds of incentives to get people to work. And we have our people work a 24-hour week, 4 days a week, 3 days off, with all the benefits that we can throw at them. But I can tell you where the people have gone that you're missing. All you have to do is pick up the Voice and Viewpoint and look at our classifieds and our public notices. We run more fictitious businesses now as people are paying to start businesses than ever before. We're up to 3.5 pages of fictitious business startups that people are coming in the doors to start their own businesses because they no longer can make it working 2 or 3 part-time jobs the way this place is set up. And so
Yeah.
that's an issue. And then we have some unkept promises, Ms. Coker. You don't know this, but when they set up Horton Plaza years ago, Dr. Thompson, was 25 years ago when they made that deal, they came to the city and they made this offer to the city that they would hire local people to work at Horton Plaza and it would become a job hub. And I remember this very well because at the time I was teaching policy and planning at National University. And what they did was the jobs that they talked about giving to our people didn't materialize. It turns out that the people doing the marketing for Horton Plaza were in Atlanta. And so they gave the contract to people out of the state who had no idea here, and the jobs never came for our people. And so then we always had this battle in terms of who wanted to work and who would accept work. And of course, with the biotech and all of the other industries here, the most of the emphasis, Dr. Thompson, correct me, has always been north of 8. And south of 8 has been like a desert place that people just didn't want to gravitate to. So tell me something then, having thrown more and more of this stuff out, we know the Convention and Visitors Bureau had that relationship with the city at that point. But I understand the Tourism Authority has more involvement of the hotel industry. Could you talk about how that works with the city? How, because you in effect replace Convention and Visitors. Can you say something about the difference?
Yeah. So our primary goal, our mission is to drive visitor demand to the destination. Whether that's an international visitor, whether that is, I should say, regardless of purpose of trip. So whether that's an international visitor, whether that's a business visitor coming for a convention or meeting or trade show, or whether that's a leisure visitor that's coming. And so the way that we are funded as of 2008 is there is a fee that is assessed on paid hotel rooms of hotels that are 70 rooms or more. So that is what was referred to, and you certainly know when this was set up, was the Tourism Marketing District. The Tourism Marketing District is an entity that collects that tax, and then they fund organizations that are able to generate overnight room nights. So it really is an investment. So it's investment back into what is providing that tax, meaning the hoteliers. We are their number one funder, and they are obligated to fund the tourism, San Diego Tourism Authority. So that's our primary funding. I'd say about 90% of our funding comes from that tax.
Well,
And
how does that fit in with the old TOT, the
so the
tourism
TOT,
occupancy tax?
the total TOT, which is occupancy tax, which currently is 10.5%,
Right,
goes directly to the city.
right.
And the city uses that for police, fire, infrastructure, education, waste management, So they use that for city services that, of course, we all enjoy as residents. So the TOT is in total control by the city. This 2.2% tax or assessment that I'm referring to is above the TOT, and that is what is referred to as the Tourism Marketing District Assessment. And that's how we're funded. So we no longer receive any of the 10.5 that goes directly to the city.
And so there was a battle when they started that because people were concerned about that tax being added on top of the TOT. Some of the people in
Yeah,
the city. So there was a real struggle with this concept. And so I don't think most of the people here understand how this works because in addition to the way you're functioning, we're bringing people here. There are also some local events like the things we did that deserve the support because they bring people here. Um,
correct.
and
And
yes,
the major driver for us is definitely overnight room nights. We
right,
are focused on taking the dollars that the hotels have generated and putting them back into marketing programs and programs that are going to bring overnight visitors that come in. And we know when they're coming in from farther away destinations that they're going to stay in our hotels. So
longer.
we're very focused on international visitors. We're also focused on that drive market for leisure demand. And that's primarily because, as you know, we've got 40 million people in California. So right in our backyard, we've got markets like Arizona, Las Vegas, Southern California, LA, for example, where those folks will drive down, spend the weekend, or they'll come on a Thursday. And now, of course, folks can work from anywhere. So they'll come down and they'll stay in the hotels. So therefore, they're regenerating
Right,
dollars back into the TMD coffers. But the hotel tax, which is considered TOT tax, so transient occupancy tax, that goes directly to the city for the city's use in terms of city services. And the concern, and really in any destination, is when you start uh, increasing the tax and or assessment, do you then become non-competitive, right? So if you raise the tax but so much, and let's just say I'm a leisure guest and I have the opportunity to come to San Diego or have the opportunity to go to Phoenix, and of course we all like to say, yeah, but it's so hot. But if I know that my hotel tax and my hotel rate is significantly less than going to Phoenix, then that's going to give me more money to go out and take my family to the restaurants. I can go to the different attractions. I can go to all of those different attractions. So we always want to make sure that as we're looking at TOT and the TMD, that we are staying competitive with those cities that we compete head to head with for whether convention business, leisure business, or international visitation. And so I'm sure that was a big part of the conversation when this first came up. Right now, we are definitely in a window where we are competitive and we have the opportunity, should Measure C, which we are hopeful will go through, which, as you know, is in the courts right now being
that's a whole
appealed,
nother story. Yes.
whole nother story,
Okay.
would allow us to fund the expansion of the convention center. And the reason why that is key is because that too will allow us to hold two conventions, for example, at one time, which of course generates more overnight stays, which generates more hotel rates, which generates more TOT for all of us as residents. So the potholes that you complain about in your street, or there aren't enough police officers on the street, that TOT helps pay for that. And just to give your listeners an idea of how much TOT our industry generated, that does go into city coffers in fiscal year 2019, which would have been July 1st of 18 to June 30th of 2019, TOT generated $295 million.
I can believe it.
That's what the city was able to use for a lot of services that we all benefit from. And then the TMD allowed us to market in industry in cities like Vegas and San Antonio and back then, of course, when we were able to do national campaigns, but up and down the East Coast when it's cold and it's snowing, we can tell folks to come to San Diego. So it really is the TMD dollars are really a reinvestment back into the groups that are able to come and or leisure visitors and international visitors. And international visitors are key, as you know, because they come and they stay longer.
Right.
So a person from, China, and obviously right now that's difficult for them, but China or UK or Brazil or Germany or France, they come and they stay a long time and they spend a lot of money, more so than our domestic leisure travelers come. So we really need all three legs of that stool to be operating and spending money in the city. And then the last thing I'll say about it is what listeners may not understand is hotel visitors, 70% of what they spend their dollars are in small businesses around San Diego. So they check into their hotel, but they immediately go out of their hotel.
Right.
They eat in the local restaurants. They go to the attractions. They buy from small shops. They experience San Diego and they spend 70% of their spend in the communities. And so that's important too for us because, as you know, San Diego is the home of small businesses. That really is what drives our economy here, obviously outside of the military. And so the fact that our visitors come to the destination and they make their way into Barrio Logan or the Convoy District or other neighborhoods and they enjoy our favorite, Caribbean, Jamaican restaurants, that's what we need them to do. We need them to come here because San Diegans don't support the restaurants and the attractions as much as they can. None of us are eating out 7 nights a week.
No.
So they need visitors to help supplement that.
We can't. Dr. Thompson.
So one of the things I want to ask is that looking at the small businesses in the promoters and also the churches, one of the things that we've been finding out that's been very difficult is that if we don't have 15 plus rooms, we literally cannot get any type of concessions made at the quality hotels. Even if you're doing, like I was just pricing out a 65 room nights, and they then came back and said to one of the producers, you need 25 room nights per night to even be considered for the discount. How do we then begin to create some headway for the independents, the smaller businesses that are bringing people into our city, as well as the church conventions that are running up against the same thing?
Yeah. First of all, you should be coming through us. You should be sending that information to us and allowing us to help you with that.
Yes.
And I say that because, the number of hotels and room nights that we work with every day, we have leverage because we know, for example, we get calendars, we get the inventory from our hotels that say, hey, I've got a week in July that's soft, or I've got a week in August or September or October. And then what our sales managers can do is they can work with those producers. So for example, in your program, we can say, okay, here are the dates that look really good. If you're able to, or you would say to us, these are the dates that I need, we can go out and source that. But then we can also come back and say, if you could shift that by a week or a day, these are the types of concessions that you can get. But it really does come down to supply and demand. So when folks are doing ones and twosy groups off like that, it is going to be difficult for them to take advantage of discounts. But when they come to our organization, and the reason why I say that is because we don't charge, because we're funded by hotel tax. So reaching out to us and our sales managers, and we have sales managers that handle the very large conventions. So the Comic-Cons, we have folks that handle the medical conventions that bring 50,000 people in. But we also have a core group of sales managers that are focused on putting pieces of business into individual properties and what we refer to as self-contained hotel pieces of business. So whether it's a board meeting for 10 hotel room nights or whether it's up to 100 room nights, we have folks that specialize in that and we can help them. And also too, we can help educate on, listen, October and November or September and October are extremely busy convention times. So if there's an opportunity for your group to maybe meet over Rosh Hashanah, because maybe those that are attending are not practicing, and so therefore they're okay with meeting over Rosh Hashanah, or the Tuesday, Wednesday before Thanksgiving, or the Tuesday, Wednesday right after Labor Day, we can help steer in those directions what might be a better fit. There is no secret that San Diego is a highly sought out destination. And our hotels pre-COVID were running easily, 80% occupancy. And anytime you have that kind of demand, it is tough to try and negotiate deals and concessions on your own. But also, too, we can help with things like this particular has a large convention in it. And if your group doesn't need space and they just need rooms, we can do what we call marry you with that group. And then that might also help with concessions, or maybe it's the last day the group is checking out, or maybe it's the day that they're during setup.
Well,
So those types of things we can definitely help with.
let me bring this a little closer to us, because we've talked about the industry and the people, but we still have a situation where we have this 4 to 5% of us here in San Diego. Many of us belong to national groups. Like, I'm on the board of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, 200 plus members. We're meeting next month in New Orleans for the first time since the pandemic in terms of in person. And in the past, like back in 1995, I brought the national convention to San Diego, but I have turned down efforts to bring a convention back here, and I've done so because of the attitude of some of the business people here. They don't do business with us, and we're here. And so why am I going to bring people here to line their pockets? And it's like the hotels. Long ago, before you came, I had situations where, like the churches you mentioned, we had the churches come here at one point, National Baptist, they were in Mission Valley. People would put in a big tent without air conditioning. These old sisters were hot and passing out. And in those days, they wanted to isolate us into an area. There was no transportation provided. It was before the trolley that you could get downtown or shopping centers, and they wouldn't even carry my newspaper in the newsstands when they had a whole contingency of black people staying in the hotel. So now we've come to the point where we are traveling and we're coming, but we still, there's so many of us here that belong to national entities that we can determine whether or not people come to San Diego. And at one point with TLT, that they would send out an advance team. We would meet with your counterpart. Many times they would try to offer incentives for us to come. I know at one point when the late Councilman Stevens was here and they wanted the Baptist convention to come, they offered them a couple of $100,000 to help defray the expenses. We don't have those kind of discussions. And so that's something I'm concerned about. And there's another area to this, the cruise ship industry, which has come back to San Diego. I sail in and out of San Diego pre-pandemic on different cruise lines for different periods of time. I've gone from here to Alaska, Hawaii, wherever. And it's convenient, excuse me, to be able to just go downtown, get on a ship, and go. Now, we had the Soul Train cruise come here and come out of San Diego a few years ago. That turned into all kind of havoc because of marketing, and people came from out of state. But then there was a battle at the last minute to try to fill vacancies on the ship, and they dropped the rate. And then you had people who were complaining that they paid one rate and other people were getting on at a different rate. But we can't seem to get folks to understand the importance of interacting with our community here, which influences whether or not other people come to San Diego, and especially people of color, making up that $63 billion that I talked about. The same pitch that I had to make years ago following, Prop 109, and things like the National Bar Association, which I was a member of at the time, refused to come to San Diego pre-MLK. And I came to the city and made the point that you are losing monies. And it wasn't hard to do that because many years ago, I was in the travel industry before the Bahamas opened up between April and November. And I remember going down there and we did some negotiations and they created Goombay Festival, which then brought African Americans from the States to the islands during the summer because we, like the people who lived there, didn't mind the heat. And so it worked out for us and it became a big thing. So San Diego has moved backwards from the progress that we made in getting us involved. I used to have newsstands along the pier, and I had people write back to me who came to San Diego. They got off the ship. They went sightseeing. They always want to know where are the black people. I used to ask myself before I ever moved here, where were the black people here? Because you don't run into people, and people would write back. They get our paper and they write back to us. But there needs to be an understanding that our community here represents an untapped key to the national business that we should be looking at trying to attract and not just be focusing on Europeans, who only want to come when it gets cold. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you?
You
Yeah,
bring up a great point, and you are absolutely right. And I would say there, I agree with you that there needs to be an awareness, but I would say there needs to be an education, right? Like folks
good
need to
word.
be educated on the importance of the dollars that the African American community has and how we can tap into it. So one of the things that we're doing, that we're looking at now, there's a organization, Tourism Diversity Matters, and it was recently created, probably in the last 2 years. And so we're going to do an assessment of how San Diego stacks up. So we're going to San Diego Tourism Authority. And so we're going to look at things like our supplier diversity. We're going to look at things like our marketing. We're obviously going to look internal as well. So we're going to look at our culture, our hiring practices. And from there, there's going to be a series of action steps that we then take to make sure that we are, one, meeting the needs, that we are reflective of the community that we serve, but more importantly, San Diego is reflective of the customer that we're looking to attract. I am a firm believer in data. And so the moment that we get this, assessment done, that's going to tell us what I think we already know, that there are some marketing programs, we need to put some dollars behind that in terms of investing and reaching the African American community. I think that there are probably some enhanced supplier diversity things that we can also do. We did start this year a tourism accelerator program, and you talked about it earlier, that the part of that program, it's a 10 business program because that's financially what we were able to start with. But essentially what it is it's 10 businesses that either have to be owned by a person of color, LGBTQ, veteran-owned, or women-owned. And they aren't currently a member of SDTA. And so what we want to do is we want to bring them in. We've got wraparound services. So we've got a sponsor, Procopia, who's offering legal advice for them. We've got the San Diego Business Journal that is looking at doing some marketing for them. Obviously, we're going to market them on our website as well as
Can you
other.
pause right there, please? Okay, because this is important. The San Diego Business Journal does not have a relationship with our communities. And this is getting to be a real big issue because at the end of the day, I'll toot our horn, Dr. Thompson and I have a relationship with our community. The Business Journal just made a big foobar with the Black Chamber here in terms of the community. And so while you want to work with everybody, you need to be aware of some of the dynamics involved because the Business Journal, Voice of San Diego, the Union Tribune, none of those people are substitutes for Asian Journal, Filipino Press, Voice and Viewpoint, Vietnamese, Chinese, El Latino. All of our papers, we are the majority ethnicity group. And I hope that when you all identify the people that you're reaching out to, that no one will use the word disadvantage. Okay, because the minority disadvantage, unfortunately, are words that the Small Business Act coined, but the reality is people are ethnically identifiable, and that's the key to who we are. Because once you use those other terms, a whole bunch of things kick in that become restrictive and prohibitive and work against the very thing that you're trying to accomplish. So I just wanted to throw that in because that won't come from any place else other than from us. Did I cut you off, Dr. Thompson?
Well, no, I was just going to say, in addition to it, what's really important is that, you know how they say bigger is not always better. Many times when you look at your smaller businesses or your smaller entities, they're a targeted market. And because they are a targeted market, they're more effective and their reach is more targeted, and that's what I think moving forward we're looking to see in the city of San Diego. And I use it because we do a tremendous amount of promotion because we do a lot of events, and literally there are certain things that I could advertise all day long in the Union Tribune, and no one will ever pay attention to it, even
Right.
if it's on the front page. And there's just certain things that I always tease people, and this is my running joke right now. Channel 10 is located in the community, but it doesn't have the community feel. A lot of people are now saying that News 8 is the community because it's starting to look more like the communities that we serve throughout San Diego. So it's really about connecting with the different niches. Besides just what bigger is not always the better, and that's what we've been sharing
Right.
with the powers that be, and they're starting to listen and tapping in to the multiple smaller entities that are having the biggest impact.
Absolutely. And that is extremely important. The one thing that I do want to say is remember the businesses, we are trying to give them exposure to markets outside of San Diego
Mm-hmm.
because we want the visitor that's in Detroit
Right.
or Los Angeles or Topeka, Kansas to look on our website or look at any marketing campaign that we've done and say, oh, there when I come to San Diego, there is this business that I definitely need to work with. Whether it's in the details and which is a planning and design event company. So giving them exposure as conventions are looking for maybe someone who's got boots on the ground. That meeting planner might be in DC, but our goal is should they see Nita and her business, it's, you know what, I've got two events that I'm doing on that Thursday, Friday. I want to have Nita plan those events. So we definitely, I definitely get exactly what you're saying. What we're trying to do is give them what we think a piece of the tourism economy that they don't always have access to,
Right.
right? They can't sometimes afford the membership dues, or they don't have the sophisticated marketing systems that we can expose them to or help them with. And sometimes it's also just learning from others. So if Nita, for example, can work with a member that we already have that's doing, let's say, 250 events a year, maybe there's an accounting software that that person uses that she might be able to use. Maybe there's it can be something as simple as a tax deduction that she may not be aware of, that other, that one of our senior or larger members can partner with them on. And that's really the next phase is also a lot of our board members and a lot of our members have said, hey, I'm happy to buddy with some of your, some of the 10 cohorts to give them some lessons learned, because maybe 10 years ago, I was at their level in terms of, the revenue that they generate. And now I'm here, and these are some pitfalls that I was able to avoid. So the whole idea of the program is to bring them under the tourism umbrella, and they might not have been able to do that on their own. But then also, too, those visitors that are coming to San Diego might not have necessarily known about that Jamaican Caribbean,
Right.
restaurant, because that restaurant didn't have the means to be able to promote on our website. But now we can expose our visitors to it. That's awesome. And we've already seen some success in that. Several of the businesses that are in the cohort are getting leads and are getting some exposure, just one, to local organizations, but also to some of our conventions as well. And some of our conventions that are coming in are specifically asking for list of minority businesses that
Well,
they can connect with and use.
as much as I want us to keep going, we're going to have to stop, and we're going to have to bring you back again because we got a few more things we must do before we end this program. But we
Absolutely.
wanted to give people this opportunity to hear you and for us to interact. And we're here every Wednesday, and our programs are archived, so the people who missed this one tonight, they can still go tomorrow and pull it up and listen to it. And so we are going to maintain a connection with you in relationship, and we hope that you all will remember that we are part of this community that you want to reach, and we're very key elements in terms of doing so. Matter of fact, every week, every Tuesday, we have a group here called Black Men and Women United. I think I'd mentioned it to you. It was organized back in 2004. I've maintained keeping it going. It's an open forum for our folks to come on. And if you're African American, you're automatically a member. So you don't. I have to apply for membership, and you're welcome to come. And it's like a kitchen table thing. So we'll make sure that you get the information if you decide at some point to come in. But we want to thank you for being with us this evening. Did you have any parting thoughts, Dr.
I just
Thompson?
want to say thank you so much. I've been looking forward to meeting you. And so in this forum, I'm just excited to meet you face to face. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I definitely, there is no ego here. So I am always looking for feedback. And if you see anything that we can do better, please reach out. Let me know. I take it in the spirit that it's given. And so this has been very helpful for me as well. And I appreciate you. I really do. I appreciate the time you've given me. And I appreciate you being a future resource for me as well.
Well, I'm going to make sure I let Mr. Bogle know that we're going to be looking out for you and supporting you. And I'm probably one of the few publishers that talks to him without genuflecting. And so he he requires that. But thank you so much for being here. And we're going to be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Have an amazing night.
Okay.
Thank you. You too.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
So, Dr. Warren, very interesting conversation. I tell you, I learned a whole bunch tonight. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I'm about ready to get my pen and paper out.
All right.
But more than anything else, Dr. Warren, what I'm very, very excited about is, again, another history lesson about, what it took to get to the Gold Coast Classic. And a lot of people, they look at it, and because you made it look easy, they think it is easy. But if they only knew the uphill battles that had to be taken to get that event off the ground.
It was 3 years in the making before we did the first event.
Yeah.
And it involved a lot of travel, and we looked and studied San Diego like she's talking about. We saw why they created the Holiday Bowl. Mm-hmm. We saw that window in November that wasn't being used. And these are the things. But we also had Super Bowl come here, 2 Super Bowls following that. And, my late wife, Jerry, was on both of those Super Bowl committees. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have enough black businesses, Leonard, to do the receptions that the Super Bowls wanted to give for their members. We were scrounging to get black carryouts to come together just so they could serve food at a reception. Mm-hmm. And so we hopefully we've grown there. We see more restaurants of color, and I think that with people here like Ms. Coker, we can begin to turn the clock and open up some more business opportunities for us.
Yeah, and I think that it's consistently important that we also talk about the vehicles of how we disseminate information.
Yes.
Again, because we can use the big, like, in the record industry, we say the big 5.
Yeah.
We can use the bigger entities, but they're not the most effective industry because, like I said, if you're trying to get to the Asian, if you don't get into the Asian newspaper, you're not going to get it.
It won't work.
It's not going to
work.
work.
And see, our people haven't caught on to that.
Yeah.
Because we are not demanding that people support us while we support them in terms of creating jobs. We can create jobs, you and I both, for people in the community if the community doesn't have to spend this money, if it makes the people coming to them spend money with us. Mm-hmm. That allows us to hire and employ people.
Exactly.
And so they got to understand how that works.
Yeah.
And that we're not here as I'm not a nonprofit. I'm a for-profit business and have been. And, I'm about making money. So I'm not about handouts and all of the other foolishness that they bring us.
But the funny thing about it is that being a for-profit business, there is still so much that we give back. And that is
all the time,
from donations to time, energy, resources,
sponsorships.
And so even though we are for-profit, we are still yet seeing and advancing the community and the efforts. Let's flip because we don't have that much time.
Yes.
We got to talk about these mass shootings and what took place, especially in New York, and then we could pop to California if you'd like to.
Yes. Well, you know what? More and more information is coming out every day. One of the things that people have acknowledged, and I did this weekend editorial, I talked about how law enforcement has treated black mass shooters different. I mean, white mass shooters different from black people. I mean, there's no way if this young man had been black that he would have been able to walk out of there. I don't care how much body armor he had on, which became the excuse. And then we had Rittenhouse back in Minnesota, same thing, walking down the street, AK-47, kills 2 people, gets tried, judge manipulates the jury to get him off. Dillard Root, who killed the 9 folks at Mother Emanuel Church, they extradite him back, bringing him back to South Carolina. And, you know, we got a picture of him in an orange jumpsuit as they stop at McDonald's for a Happy Meal because he's hungry.
Yes.
Okay. But we don't get all of this treatment. And so people are really looking at what's taking place. We're also looking at some things that are coming out in this situation, tapes of law enforcement people laughing about the shootings after the murder, which is just ridiculous. And we're now wondering, what can we do? We can be conscious of the extent to which people are studying our community and looking to do things against us. And let's not forget the Walmart or the church in Texas, 27 people killed, or just here in California, Orange County, this past Sunday, the next day, where gunman went in. He was Chinese, they were Taiwanese, and he killed 1 person. The congregation overtook him and held him down. But we've had this year over 200 mass shootings in the first 5 months of this year. And the number is still going strong. And so we really need to pay attention to our surroundings. We need to understand that white supremacy and extremism is very real. And one of the things we're about to miss an opportunity, Dr. Thompson, is we just had a primary yesterday in Pennsylvania. We got one coming in 3 weeks here in California, and we got primaries in other states. If our people don't get out to the polls and vote against those Trumpeteers that are seeking to take over Secretary of State elections and all these offices, we're going to lose control of the House and the Senate. And if the Republicans get control of those 2 entities, by the time we have the 24 presidential elections, we're going to find a situation that's going to be quite different than what happened January 6th, because these people will stop the Electoral College, throw it out, throw it into the House, and we will end up with somebody that we didn't vote for president. So now's the time, folks, to pay attention to what's going on, to register to vote, to start having active shooter awareness and start thinking in terms of how we defend home and territory and not have people thinking we just standing around waiting to be shot.
Well, Dr. Warren, let me ask you this question, because a lot of people that are voting right now, even though they were not Trump fans, financially they're saying that they were better off when Trump was in office. And so some people are voting based on their financial situation. Gas prices are high. All of this stuff is going on. And so they believe that if they vote Republican, it will bring back the finances.
Well, you know, I got one word for those folks. They're just fickle. They are fickle-minded, and some of them are just plain stupid. I don't know how you can say things were better off with Trump. When you look at before Biden got there, we didn't even have a mass push for the vaccines and all of the things that have happened to respond to this crisis. He didn't create the gas crisis. He released 180 million barrels of oil, and now Congress has got to pass laws because we know that the oil companies are gouging on that. And so it's just laziness to follow a Republican line of thinking just because nothing the Democrats do will ever be right from a Republican standpoint. Nothing.
Well, let me say this, and this is what I explained when someone said that. I said, your financial picture was better because of the fact that Obama laid the groundwork. And so what you saw during the Trump era is what Obama had set into play, and that's why it looked so good, because it was already set into play. With the Biden era, you are now seeing what Trump set into play. And that is the reason why we're seeing the financial hardships right now, not because of Biden, but because of the policies and the things that Trump put into play. So this is the Trump era, or the backlash of what Trump did when he was president.
Well, you know, I like to give some people some facts because a lot of us just don't read and we want to be convenient. The Heritage Foundation, 5 months before Trump was elected, issued a plan that involved undoing every major program that Obama put in place. And when Trump got into office, he started dismantling with executive orders everywhere he could. His whole emphasis was stop what Obama had done. And if he hadn't done such a job of that, we wouldn't have been so far behind with the pandemic. Then we know from the books that have been written since then that he understood that people were dying, and he was not concerned about how many people died. Trump never cared about anyone but himself, and all of his followers, 99% of them, have bought into the race replacement theory. They are afraid of America becoming brown and black, and they don't care what it takes to try to hold on to some mythological dream that white supremacy is important.
Well, let me just say this, and I'm going to end with this, that it is really sad that people are buying into that race replacement theory, because it's not us that are all going and connecting with people that are of the white gender or the white cultural group. They're selecting and choosing to go out of the white
group
and their group, and they're marrying black and brown and Asian, and their young people are starting to say that we want to be able to love those that we love. So the browning or the blackening of America is not based on our choices, but they're making choices.
Right.
And so, the reality is it is what it is, because this is a eclectic mix of people, and you can't have a eclectic mix of people and not expect them to mix.
No, you can't. And let us not forget that in the midst of our protest against George Floyd, the voting rights and all the legislation that's come forth, there's been a tremendous number of young white people and white people of all ages that have gotten involved. So it's not a race thing in terms of blacks against white. It's an American thing, saying that kind of thinking is outdated, it's out of place, and we have to work with each other. One of the most impressive things to see in Buffalo was to see white people coming to that food distribution point with bags of groceries to give because they realized people couldn't shop there. And to see that community come together in such a way that it cared about helping each other. That's the America that we're talking about. And all of these people who are trying to hype us with critical race theory, fallacies, and fake news and hatred, we cannot allow them to do so. That means we got to replace the ones who are trying to run for office, get the ones in office out of office, become voters, break down the statistical myth that we don't care, we're not going to participate, stop being one-issue people. If you're not for LGBTQ and the Democrats are, well, wait, do you have that LGBTQ issue, or do you lose all the things? We're not in favor of, we're talking about a Roe v. Wade. We don't have to be struggling over Roe v. Wade when we have a Congress that can vote and pass a law to negate whatever the Supreme Court does. And we just tried last week, and what did we lose? 49-51.
Yeah.
You got that rogue Manson out of West Virginia who wouldn't vote. And the vice president was sitting there to break the vote, and she couldn't get it. You got McConnell against everything that's for anybody. But yet, Dr. Thompson, let me make this point, that we can vote to give $44 billion to support Ukraine, and God bless the people in this struggle, but yet we can't come up with $22 billion to continue to take care, child care, the coronavirus needs and of all of our people here, vaccines. We can't do that, but we can go outside and do more.
Yeah. And so we as the Americans and we as people have to start saying that we must take care of home, and we must start having some real conversations about where we're at. And then another thing that I think is so important that we have to understand at the end of the day, would America be America without the different cultures? If you take just the black and the brown and you take just 2 days of what they bring to the economy and you remove it, it bankrupts the economy.
Oh, yeah.
And so, well, everybody is trying to put you in their places, or everybody is trying to say where you should be. They have to realize that because we are, they are.
That's
and
right.
if we were not, then they could not.
And they got to come to understand that this is a reality.
Yes.
Oh, we're going to do more with Dr. Thompson. The time went fast, but it was well spent. And we invite you to get your copy of The Voice and Viewpoint. tune in to God Radio, get the app that we have available there for you so you can keep up, and let people hear from you. Remember that we need to hear your voices. The people without a voice cannot be heard. We provide a voice. Now we want to hear you.